No, I just hope they got it on the ballot.
Let's kick it off.
Well, I hope so too. Whose job is it?
Beautiful. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Goldie, would you do us the honor tonight?
Yes, sir.
This is actually, now this is a historic, you got me taped, Tommy? This is a historic meeting. And I want the head of the Portchester Historical Society to lead us in the pledge tonight.
This is a historic
town, 1660. We had the flashbacks play, we'll hear about. And tonight is the last meeting we're going to have in this building. I know you don't like it, Billy, but lead us in the pledge, Goldie. Lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. And tonight, please keep the Lorenzo family in your prayers. Our video man, Tom Lorenzo's father, John, passed away. And Tom has been a good friend to the village of Portchester and to the town of Rye. And also to the Crisp family, who lost Ernie Crisp too soon. Heavenly Father, bless this assemblage. Grant us the wisdom to make our every decision fair-minded and in the best interest for all its residents.
Amen.
Amen.
I'd just like to echo Billy's comments and say that our heartfelt feelings go out to the Lorenzo family. Tom's been a big friend to the town for a number of years, and we know him to know that we share the pain of his loss. Okay. Bill, Bishop, I'm missing an agenda here. Let me see. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to go right off with the energy program from George Ford. George? Thanks very much. Welcome.
Need a little bit of light there.
Alternative energy program.
Okay.
Correct. Thank you, George.
Paul, could you grab that microphone? Thank you. Just put it down. That's all, just to get out of the way.
Good evening, everyone. Supervisor Carvin and council members, staff, and the public. I was asked tonight in speaking with Bill Villanova, I actually had reached out to Mr. Villanova after I read the article in the Westmore News about, I guess, 2 weeks ago, when at your last meeting you were discussing the opportunity to do PACE financing for either nonprofit entities in the town of Rye or in the scope of town of Rye, whether it's the village of Portchester or Rye Brook. And when I read the article, I immediately made the phone call to Mr. Villanova and offered my services to come in and speak and do a presentation and offer some education, if you will, about solar and how organizations throughout the town of Rye can implement solar without going through the PACE financing mechanism. And I understand the concern from the town with regards to financing these type of projects through a tax bill. It is a lot of management for an entity to do that without having that monthly payment where all of a sudden they're coming up with one large tax bill at the end of the year. So to give you some background, the company that I work for, Standard Solar, been in business since 2004, probably one of the older engineering, procurement, and construction firms in the solar business as of today. If you think about solar, how it's come mainstream over the last 5 or 10 years, really started out in 2004, 2005, coming mainstream. Our company is headquartered in Rockville, Maryland. We have over 70 employees. We've done 1,500 installations. We operate in 14 states, and those are the most friendly solar states out there. Bishop, if you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Again, not only a full-service engineering, procurement, and construction firm, but we do the design, the financing, and the maintenance as well for solar installations. We were ranked number 23 out of 6,500 registered solar contractors in America, and we've been in part of the Inc. 500 over the last 4 years. Again, this is just some scope of work that we've done: utility, distributed generation, commercial, industrial, government, education, and then of course the residential side, not only solar installations for residential components, but also energy efficiency and energy management as well. Scope of work entails system planning, the financing, which is a big hurdle today for many institutions, whether it's going to be done through PACE financing, power purchase agreements, tax equipment leasing products, or capital leases. And again, just the other details, again, engineer, design, project construction, and O&M. Solar, how it works, very simple. Simple technology, unlike an iPhone today where you have all these crazy applications that you could use on your phone today. Solar is basically, it's a glass panel up on a roof, or it could be ground mounted, it could be put on a carport. It's plugged into an inverter, which is basically the brains behind the solar component itself. It's put into your direct meter at your facility, and then that power goes into the actual grid where the electricity comes from your local utility. In New York, one of the beauties about the program here in New York, not only are they offering a performance-based incentive where you'll get a cash rebate over a period of time, whether it's going to be 1, 2, or 3 years. And the reason why I say that is they haven't decided. The new program will be opening up sometime in the first quarter of 2015. And the stakeholders meetings that I've participated in, those are still being put together as far as how the program is going to be designed and implemented for the incentives. But more importantly, for an entity like, let's say, the Village of Portchester, where they have multiple facilities throughout the village and therefore multiple meters, New York allows you to build one solar array and aggregate net meter all of the power back to all the different meters that are located throughout the village. Or in the case of a large corporation that has different facilities located inside the same utility territory, they could go ahead and install one large solar array and then net meter that power back to each one of their meters. How do we finance these systems? And this was the main reason for my reaching out to Mr. Villanova. Typically, we've seen for nonprofit institutions or municipalities, schools, those entities that can't take advantage of the tax credits that are being offered by the federal government today because they're nonprofits. What we've seen is these power purchase agreements, or better known as PPAs. This is a mechanism where there's no upfront capital expenditure by the end user of the solar power. A third party, typically a bank, a large institution, owns the system. They maintain it, and they're basically selling the power from that system to the host at a discount. And those typical agreements are around 20 years, sometimes extended to 25. You have predictable energy costs for the term of the agreement because you know what your cost is up front. If today you're paying hypothetically 10 cents a kilowatt hour for your power, the power purchase agreement with a typical saving of 20% would mean that you're paying 8 cents for your power, and that is a 20-year agreement. The upside is there's no operational or performance risk because you don't own the system, somebody else owns it and they will maintain it. And again, as a nonprofit entity for a village or a municipality or a school, there's no need for federal and state tax appetite from the site host. One of the things that Standard Solar is coming up with and is unique and new to financing these solar systems is a lot of host companies, whether it's a church or a school, they want to own these solar systems. They want to be able to benefit from the solar system long term, not just through a 20 or 25% savings, but more along the lines of how do we own this system if we can't turn the tax credits that are the main component of the incentives into cash. And that's where we've designed these programs with several banks through what's known as a TELP, or a tax equipment leasing program. Again, this is a unique lease structure. It's available only to tax-exempt organizations such as a government, education, or not-for-profit entity. The leases are structured so that the full cost of the project asset is going to be amortized over the lease period. And typically, these leases are somewhere between 8 and 10 years, depending on how long it'll take to monetize that asset or amortize that asset. The beauty, again, is for the host site, they're basically, in essence, replacing their existing utility bill, the check that they're writing every single month to the utility. That's going away because the solar is now producing that power for them But the TELP, the tax exempt lease, is now taking that payment from the utility to pay down and amortize that system. So in essence, after the 8 or 10 years, now the church or the municipality would own the system and be able to generate their power for free from that solar system through the life of the system. Solar systems have a life of 25 years. They're guaranteed for 25 years. Will it in 25 years mean that you have to pull the system off your roof? It's not going to work? No. It's still going to work. Solar will work forever. They degrade, panels degrade because they're being beat up by the sun, and they degrade at about 0.5% each year. So if you think about in year 25 at 0.5%, that means your solar system should still be creating about 87.5% of its original power.
George,
Sure.
so if I understood, how much does it typically cost to install a system?
Varies depending on what your consumption is. So again, your house may only use 10,000 kilowatt hours a year, where somebody like Near Eyes, for example, probably uses several million.
I'm just trying to get an example. So take my house, 10,000 kilowatts. What would it cost for my house?
Before any of the incentives, probably about $40,000.
Okay, now, and so the entity doesn't have to pay for that?
You being the host, you would say, well, I don't want to own, I want to own the system, but I don't want an upfront capital expenditure, and I can't use tax credits.
Right.
So if you were a nonprofit entity, because
Yeah.
the TELP is only for a
Right.
nonprofit, yes, you would not have to come up with any upfront capital expenditure.
And then, so then I'd have monthly payments or?
You'd have a monthly lease payment,
Right.
but because the solar is now creating the power for you instead of
Right.
the utility,
Yep.
the utility check that you have to write every month goes away.
Right, so my question is, how does the lease expenditure compare generally with the utility expenditure?
The way it's set up is, and the banks know, because they're the ones that are monetizing the tax credits, and again, they're getting a 30% federal investment tax credit. They're also getting accelerated depreciation, and depending on what their tax rate is, their effective tax rate, that could be anywhere between 60 and 65% of the project cost being covered already. So what they're doing is they're looking at your utility costs today, what the incentive is from NYSERDA or your local utility Con Ed, and they're saying your lease payment is going to be equal to or less than what your existing utility bill
Okay,
is.
that's
So it's cash flow neutral.
So, cash flow neutral?
Yes.
Okay, so basically, and how long does the lease generally last for?
Depending on how long it takes to amortize it, we've seen between 8 and 10 years in New York.
So say 10 years.
Correct.
And in 10 years, you have an asset that's worth $40,000 that you get for free, effectively.
That's correct. It self-funds itself because,
Right.
again, every month you are writing a check.
Right.
You're writing it to Con Ed or whoever your
Yeah.
utility is.
Right.
But now that's being replaced because the solar's producing the power, and you're just
Right.
taking that check and basically like a mortgage paying down that asset.
Gotcha. And then at the end of 10 years, so years 11 through 20, you have zero electricity costs?
11 through 25, as the system is warranted up to 25 years,
Wow.
that power is now free. Unlike where the typical power purchase agreements that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, the third party is always owning that system, and you're just getting the break of 20 to 25% forever. That's great. You're not coming up with any money, but we've learned that a lot of other entities out there today are saying, well, that's great, but they've really made a lot of money off of us then, and we've gotten the minimal break to that equation.
And who are typically the third parties?
Your largest banks in America.
Oh, the banks? Oh,
Yep.
really? Oh,
Yep.
wow.
Also, some of the largest developers. There are solar developers, Sun Edison, for example. There are a plethora of companies, but it's mainly these large institutions, believe it or not.
Interesting.
Any name on Wall Street.
Thank you.
Bishop, I'm sorry, could you just go back to that last slide? I just want to. So one of the other advantages to the TELP is this is an off-balance sheet transaction. So because, in essence, the bank owns the system through the course of the lease, this wouldn't be sitting on the nonprofit entity's balance sheet. It would be sitting on the bank's balance sheet. Again, the typical term is 8 to 10 years with a $1 buyout at the end. Also, the upside here is this payment is fixed on the lease for those 8 to 10 years. However, you have to take into consideration that utility rates continue to rise. So there are some years where we know here in Con Edison territory, you don't get a rate increase every year, but all of a sudden when it comes in year 3 or 4, it's 16, 17, 18%. So when you look at that, it's really about a 4.5% to 5% increase annually from the utility. The beauty is with the TELP, you're locking in that lease payment, But in year, let's say 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, as utility rates rise, you're actually saving more money because your lease payment is fixed, even though rates are going up and you're not paying for that power anymore. And again, at the end, you have 100% ownership of the system. How do you get started to consider doing solar? Takes a few pieces of information for a no-cost solar evaluation. For a ground mount system, something that's a larger opportunity for, let's say, I'm working with a few schools upstate right now, further upstate, where there's a lot more land up there. We would look at identifying land locations within 1,000 feet of a significant source, utility source, and typically 5 acres of land would be able to eliminate 1 megawatt of power, which is equal to 1 million kilowatt hours. For a roof-mounted system, you typically want to have a roof that's less than 10 years old. I think that's the norm in the solar industry. I typically say to a customer 5 years or less, because again, if you're putting an asset on your roof that's going to be there for 25 plus years, you don't want to have to take it off in year 15 because your roof needs to be replaced. Right? So 1 year of detailed electricity bills allows us to figure out what your true cost for a kilowatt hour is, and your utility service information, which we would get from your local utility, like transformer sizes, the distribution panel rating, so on and so forth. Some of the projects that Standard Solar's done, government, academic, and commercial projects. First commercial installation they did, Department of Energy. Can't ask for a better reference than that. This was done at in Washington, D.C., a 205 kW system. It was a ballasted roof mount, as you see in the picture there. And that was completed back in September of 2008. Catholic University, 677 kW system. We just run through these quickly, just some names. American University, Capital Area Food Bank, Kent County, that was 1.2 megawatts, but it wound up being additional sites, and it wound up being over 5 megawatts of power. Kenor Brake Corporation, Purdue family of, the Purdue Chicken Company, General Motors, and Ann Arundel Community College, with beautiful carports, and again, 1,500 other installations that we've done.
Take a closer look at that, Supervisor. That's a parking lot underneath there.
That's correct. Do we have some ideas here?
Well, Rytown Park has a potential.
Sure. So those are some of the installations we've done, and I don't want to bore you with 1,500 names.
I actually have a number of questions.
Sure.
They're very helpful. We get some lights here. And, well, first of all, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
Thanks for contacting us, Deputy Supervisor Villanova. Thanks for organizing this tonight. So you're familiar with. So I'm sitting in. Well, let's take the Pastor O'Hanlon. How does he compare the two opportunities? So he's going to have to borrow the money under the program that's been proposed in front of us, correct?
So he has two options. One is he could do a power purchase agreement where he says.
With you guys.
Correct.
Yep.
And we would actually own that third party now. Standard Solar is now opening up a $300 million fund.
So the third party would own the assets for the first 10 years?
20.
20 years.
That would be the whole term of the power purchase agreement.
Oh, okay, 20 years.
Yes.
And at the end of 20 years, he would get the...
At the end of 20 years, he has an option to say, take the equipment off my property, and we'd have to come in and dismantle it and take it away. He has a lot of leverage at that point, and he says, how much is it going to cost you to take this away? Well, I'll buy it from you, because it's still got 5 years left on the warranty, and that doesn't mean in 5 years it's not going to work anymore. It's still going to work. So he's got a lot of leverage at that point to say, well, I'll buy it from you. What's the fair market value? And maybe at that point we say, or another third party says, well, we've made our money and you're a church. We'll donate it, and whatever the value is, we'll get a tax write-off.
So, okay, so for 20 years, so he has no capital expenditures.
No capital expenditure.
And he has the equivalent utility expense he has today.
About 25% less than
25% less.
Yep.
Okay, 25% less utility expense, no capital outlay.
Right.
No servicing of the loan and all that.
It's not a loan. It's
No,
just
he
an
doesn't.
agreement. Yep.
I mean, versus the other alternative.
Exactly.
I'm trying to compare versus
Yep.
the alternative.
And the beauty is he's locking in the rate with a small escalator of 1% each year.
The utility rate.
Yes.
Yeah. And then he And so, all right, so that sounds obviously very, very attractive. And you only do, this is the TELP loan, this is
No, that's a power purchase
Oh,
agreement.
power purchase agreement. So you do this for anybody?
Yes.
So if I want to do it in my home,
We wouldn't do it on residential scale.
you don't do it, right? Okay.
Only
so-
commercial.
Okay, no, that's
Correct.
okay, all right. And then, so one alternative is a power purchase agreement.
Correct.
And he would have 25% reduction, and he'd get the green benefit
Absolutely.
that
He'd
he's
be able to
looking for.
promote his church as being an energy steward in the community because he has 100% of his power or whatever percent,
Perfect.
depending on how much roof space or carports or land he has.
In the other scenario, he would basically take on a loan, and he'd own the asset.
The TELP or the tax exempt equity, exempt equipment lease would be an off-balance sheet financing mechanism.
Yep,
Okay?
yep,
Because he doesn't own it outright. The
Right.
bank's going to own it for the first 10 years.
right,
He has no upfront capital expenditures.
yep,
Okay? And his payment on the lease is going to be equal to or less than his existing utility payment.
got it.
But
Okay.
utility rates rise, again, on an average of 3 to 5% a year, but his lease payment is locked in while rates continue to go up, and
It's
he's
just a
saving
fixed-
that money.
It's a fixed rate
Exactly.
lease.
And at the end of the term, he pays $1, and now he owns the system.
Wow,
That's based all on credit. So if the church or the nonprofit entity has the credit worthiness
Sure.
to borrow against a system of that size, then yes, he could do the tax exempt.
so
lease.
why would anybody do the loan? What, you mean, you guys putting Energize New York out of business, what are the advantages to the loan?
To the TELP or the PPA?
No, sorry, to the, I don't know if you've looked at the so.
The PACE
Energize-
financing?
Yeah, the PACE financing.
Well, with PACE financing for a church, they're not monetizing the tax credits in any aspect. They're
Right.
basically pushing them to the side and saying, well, I can own this asset for 20 years. That's typically when it's financed.
Right.
So what he's doing is, in essence, he's saving, and I'd have to run the numbers on it,
Yeah.
I don't know, but
Right.
maybe he's saving 25 to 30% a year
On the utility bill?
on the PACE financing versus his utility bill, right?
Okay,
But it's going to take him 20 years, and he's going to have free cash flow for that 20 years, and then at the end of 20 years, he finally owns it. With the TELP, he's able to allow the bank to monetize the tax credits. He doesn't have any savings for the first 10 years, but he's just self-funded that purchase through that payment.
so, so if I were the church, I probably would go with the TELP.
Yeah, because you have ownership.
Right,
Now, the downside for him is, well, in 10 years, now I own it, and now I have to start maintaining it.
okay.
So then he'd have to have an O&M contract, an operation and maintenance
Is that
contract.
expensive?
It's about 0.2% of the cost of the system. So if the system was $100,000, it would be, $200 a year, right?
$200,
Right. So on a $1 million system, which, solar systems are not cheap, depending on somebody's power needs, on a $2 million system, it's going to be $4,000 a year. However, if he saved $100,000 a year, because he now owns it, he's $96,000 ahead.
Excellent.
And,
Excellent.
George, just so year 11 comes, and then that process has worked its way out. System's up, it's working. They own that system now. Now 100% of that energy that is being produced from that system, 100% of that energy is being captured by the facility.
By their meter, exactly.
Okay. And 100% is captured, and if it's more than what they use, it goes back into the grid.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if there is a surplus? Do they cash out at the end of the year, or?
Great question. So when we design these systems up front, the utility and state law says we can't build a system that's 110%, more than 110% of your annual consumption. So we'd have to look at your last 12 months, and if you used 100,000 kilowatt hours, we can't build a system that's going to produce more than 110,000 kilowatt hours. Now, by law, if we did produce 108,000, at the end of the year, the utility by law has to buy that power from you and write you a check. But the goal is they don't want you becoming a utility. They just want you to take yourself off the grid.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's not they don't allow for us to go in and build these systems so you can now say, oh, I'm gonna create solar and make bring in a revenue producing income for myself every month. They don't want that.
Why?
It goes a little further and taking the utility putting the utility out of business. They want to do the right thing, but they don't want you to put them completely out of business.
Mr. Nowak?
I just have a quick question.
Mr. Nowak, can you, for the people?
Technology, I'm sorry. These are long-term leases, and with technology moving along at the pace that it is moving now,
Sure.
I could see a scenario where very easily somebody who comes in to an agreement like this, 110% or not, all of a sudden new light bulb technology comes in, new transformer technology comes in, their power usage is coming down naturally. Will they continue to benefit from that?
Sure. I think when we look at those aspects, I have 2 children now, a 4.5-year-old and almost a 2-year-old. And here they are, they both want iPads. Pretty soon they're all both going to want iPhones. So every single day, it's a great question, but when you think about this, we're finding something else to plug into the socket. Regardless of reduction, yeah, you have to reduce because you're gonna keep putting more in there, and your bill's gonna keep going up. So, I agree. Now, solar technology itself. This is probably a different part of your question, and I'll answer it this way. We really haven't seen a lot of transformation in the solar business as far as technology. The panels, 10 years ago were rated at 220, 230, 240 watts. Today, they're 320 watts. So they've condensed the silicon a little bit, gotten a little more in there, but the technology is the same. It's just a piece of glass with sand and silicon. It sits up on your roof, right? It produces power. It's got an electrical wire attached to it. There's no moving parts to a solar system. There's no new application. It's very simple. But to your point, yes, if somebody built a system today to equal 100% of their consumption, and in 5 years they did some energy efficiencies where now they're only at 90%, well, the utility's going to buy the power. They're going to be able to avoid their 90,000 kilowatt hours a year. That extra 10,000 would then be bought at the retail rate, and then anything above that would be sent into the grid, and you would get a wholesale credit, which wholesale credit might be only 4 cents a kilowatt hour.
You continue to benefit.
Yes. Yes.
I was going to ask that same question, so thank you.
Yep. So again, the 10% overage would be done at retail rates, what you're paying, and then anything above that would be at a wholesale rate. But believe me, I think you'll have 5 more things to plug into the socket that'll eat that power up. Or you could just turn up the air conditioner in the summer and be really, really cozy.
I got one question.
Sure.
Obviously, I know it works in the wintertime, but when
Yes.
you have a few days where you got snow on your roof and snow on those panels, how do you get it off there?
So, great question. You don't. You leave it. You let Mother Nature do her work. Because typically after a big snowstorm, it's typically sunny out. Day or two later, right?
Yes.
And even on my own commercial solar system, within a couple of days, it starts to melt. Obviously a 10-inch snowstorm, it's going to take some time. But what happens is when we do these models for looking at your utility usage and building a system, we just don't come up with these numbers and say, let's just throw a number on this. We take all the information, your coordinates at your exact location, where your building is. We take all the data from your utility. We take all the equipment that we're going to be speccing out for your actual project, and we plug all this information in to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory website. And what that does is it uses a 25, 30-year weather pattern history for your coordinates, and it knows, okay, there were this many snow days, this many rainy days, this many cloudy days, and on average, we know how many sunlight hours there were right here at this building. So we build these systems based upon how much production we're going to get out of those coordinates at that building. So it's going to take an effect. And yes, there's going to be 1 year, like maybe last year, we had a lot more snow. So yes, you might be your actual production from your system might be down a little bit. We saw a 5 to 7% lower production number on most systems in the Northeast this year. But then there's going to be a year where the weather's a little better and you're going to overproduce, right? So it all evens out. And again, these are 25-year models, but they're always within a few percentage points each year depending on the weather. Good question. Thank you, though.
What's the smallest loan you're prepared to take on? Smallest. So in other words, I think, again, thanking the pastor, I think he's looking at $50,000 expenditure. Is that too small, or?
Nope, that could be done.
Okay.
Yep. We have entities that we work with that would do, $50,000 up to multi-million-dollar
Beautiful.
utility scale.
That's only what the pastor found.
No, that's what I'm saying.
This could be something. This could be, a different product.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think that we should have you been in front of the Chamber of Commerce?
I have not, no.
Should get George in front of the Chamber of Commerce. It seems to me to make infinite sense.
I've looked at a lot of buildings in Portchester specifically, and unfortunately, I'll use Nearites because it's one of the biggest buildings. You know, when a solar guy sees a big building like that, you know, he salivates, right? But when you look from Google Earth and you look at his building, he's got a lot of equipment up there, and he doesn't have a lot of room for solar. So for him, and you think about it, yeah, he could do a small solar system to say, I'm doing something for
do something for this building. That's what he's going to do.
Well, or for this building, right?
This building's perfect for that.
But when you know, overall, it comes into that, you get into that discussion of how much space do I have and how big of a system can I build and how much am I going to save? You know, a building like that, it's an enormous building. He's probably using I'd say a couple of million kilowatt hours a year, and we could probably only eliminate maybe 100,000.
Gotcha.
With his roof space. So it's minimal, 5%.
Have you looked at the schools at all?
That's next.
Okay.
We actually just submitted into the K Solar program, which
what's that?
K Solar came out. It was devised by Governor Cuomo to basically spread the news that solar's here and it's up and coming and schools should do it, right? There's no incentive for schools to go through the K Solar program. What they're basically doing is they're trying to put together a standard power purchase agreement for schools to use when dealing with solar companies, so that every school is not going out trying to find their own solar company and everybody has to get a lawyer to read these PPAs because they're 100 pages thick. So K-Solar is a program that they're trying to design a specific power purchase agreement for everybody to use, but there's no monetary benefit for the schools to go through K-Solar. And it's only a power purchase agreement. That's where we were just at I attended the New York Schools and Buildings Conference up in Saratoga Springs a couple of weeks back and started to talk to several schools about this TELP product, which a lot of people are very interested in.
To the schools as well?
Yes. Anything nonprofit.
Mr. Arcaro, what are you going to make us? And I think that's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah.
Look, let me explain. Electricity consumption is going to go like that.
Yes.
Right? And if you own the asset in 10 years for free, as they say in Britain, Bob's your uncle.
Right.
I think one of the greatest challenges we'll find, and perhaps I'm very wrong, I hope I am, but is that, schools tend to be older construction, and that's going to have to be something, there could be some serious costs involved in securing the structures
Sure.
to implement these
There,
solutions.
that definitely, when you have to think about a structural upgrade, that kind of takes solar projects off the table because it's a big number.
Of course, we have some new schools out there, but
Yes.
certainly
And I actually
something to not get too excited about without thinking it through
Yep.
the
Yep.
logistics.
I actually ran into Ray Renup in Saratoga Springs, and
Oh, he's there?
yeah, so I said we got to talk. So, but yes, the age of the roofs, and especially if schools are very large, if to replace a roof there, it could be $500,000 to $1 million.
You get something like the Portchester High School, it's an older building, and it's not a flat top roof. I mean,
And it's a slate roof.
King Street School is it'd be fantastic.
The high school would be off limits, and
Street School,
King Street would be an amazing opportunity there.
There you go.
Great
All
school.
right.
Avenue, Kennedy.
Yes.
Kennedy. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Ford?
And if there are, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you
Anytime.
taking time. Deputy Superintendent,
Thank you very much for having us.
And so I think the next steps, if it's okay, I would get Pastor O'Hanlon in touch with you.
Sure.
Okay.
I would
And then,
appreciate that.
And then also the Chamber of Commerce.
Great.
Yeah,
Great idea.
that's
Thank you
great.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much,
the time.
Mr. Ford. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Supervisor Villanova. Wonderful. Okay, Mr. Tagani. Morning. How you doing?
All right.
Yeah, George is in Portchester, right? Yeah.
Huh?
He's from.
Oh, yeah. Quinn Tar Drive.
Yep.
Good evening, Board.
He's usually.
My name, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ernie Tagani, and you guys appointed me as the Director of the Rye-Town Constables. Just a little bit about myself. I'm retired from the Village of Rye Brook. I'm an auxiliary police officer in the Village of Portchester. I'm also a village marshal, and I am a volunteer fireman. I have just a small report here from Ann's office, the clerk's office. What's happening is Ann is giving me the work to distribute to the other constables, who are Dean DeLeo, Scott Sprague, and
Steve Carroll.
Steve Carroll. She'll give me the work, and I'll distribute it out evenly to those guys. I have a report for 2013. We did 17 summonses. 2012 was 23 summonses. 2011 was 25 summonses. And to date, 23 summonses. And there's also other work from the court that the constables will take and work and serve for the court. They'll come out with evictions. I'll do some training with them, and all of us will all work together on this here for the court. That's it right now, and I'll have another quarterly report on all the summonses. And I'd like to just thank Hope for notarizing everything for us. She does a great job. And if there's any other questions that the board has, feel free to ask.
Excellent. Any questions for Mr. Tagani?
Ernie, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. So this position that we afforded you for this past year, this trial time, obviously it doesn't come with any compensation or anything. So you're volunteering more time, working towards training the other constables as well, and,
right,
and really making a concerted effort to make that function of the town far greater. So I want to thank you.
You're welcome, and all the guys are great.
Echo those comments, Mr. Tagani. Thanks for all your hard work. I see you around town all the time, working hard.
Thank you.
For the community. I can't thank you enough for all you do for us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Tagani.
Okay, have a good night. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming here.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Arcaro, are you up next?
I think it'd be best if you do some narration.
Okay. Yep, sure. We've been here before.
Make sure you have a mic.
All right. Give it a second. And it should be good. All right.
Okay, well, Mr. Arcaro's put together a nice presentation for us today, and basically...
Turn that light out.
There we go. All right, terrific. And there's a number of things we want to talk about. The first thing is the state of the town, the referendum on November 4th, the Sustainability Committee, and I might ask Commissioner Councilwoman Collins and Deputy Supervisor Villanova to talk a little bit about that. I think Mr. Thomas is not here tonight to talk about the African American Cemetery and flashback. So, state of the town, well, we're a first-class town. Everybody knows that. I think that's a legal definition as well, Mr. Noto. And it basically means we have 10,000, or more population. Basically, we're preparing a newsletter to remind people what we've accomplished over the last 7 years. And Deputy Supervisor Villanova, I've forgotten. Do you have a copy of the report here?
Yes.
We put together a comprehensive analysis of the tax burden in the town of Rye on our constituent entities. I really have to, personally, I think it was a groundbreaking report. I've never seen one like that, done like it before. And we looked at the tax burden on property owners in Portchester, Rybrook, and Rye Next. So Mr. Arcaro will bring it in a second. There we go. In fact, you were on the committee, Deputy Supervisor Villanova. We had people from the public as well. This is the state of town report we did, and I've asked Mr. Arcaro to update that. And if you go to the next slide, Mr. Arcaro. Now, this is just one slide. We're going to update the numbers, but I think we all know what's happened since 2007 when we did the report with the first numbers. We update the numbers. So ultimately, something that we're all very proud of on this town board, we've reduced taxes 61%. Tom, is your camera working? I want people to know that we've reduced taxes 61%. That's not a typo. We actually fundamentally reduced taxes by 61%. Our long-term goal is still to eliminate taxes, but reduce taxes 61%. It's quite an achievement that everybody on this board ought to be proud of. Then you see what's happened in the other municipal entities. But the most important thing here, in 2007, 2008, the average property owner paid 2.27% of the value of their home in taxes. 2.727. Today, that's 3.53%. So your tax rate has increased by 55%. That ought to be worrisome to every homeowner in the village of Portchester. Extremely worrisome. Now, why is that? Actually, the village of Portchester and the county done a decent job of holding the line on taxes. What's happened is property values have come down. I guess you don't have that here. Property values in Portchester have come down 20%. So when your property values come down and taxes stay the same, your tax burden goes up 3.5%. Properties in Mount Vernon are paying 10% of the value of their home. What's going to happen? Is anybody going to buy a home where you have to pay 10%? You have to rebuy the home every 10 years? Well, we're heading in the wrong direction, let me tell you. And I know a lot of people are a little worried that we're still trying to reduce costs. People are a little worried about trying to reduce expenditures, trying to provide the same, if not better, service at the same value, at the same cost, if not reduced cost. So you know what? Look, at the end of the day, we can pay more. We can pay more taxes. You can pay 5%. What's going to happen to the value of your homes? What's that sucking sound that Ross Perot used to talk about? That's the value of your home. So at the end of the day, hold your public officials to account. Next slide, please, Mr. Arco. So, you know, the first thing I want to reiterate. Here, I'm going to turn the lights on for this. I want to reiterate. We have the finest town clerk in New York State. And we have the finest receiver of taxes in New York State. Let me repeat that, just so there's no doubt. We have the finest town clerk in New York State, and I've said it once and I've said it 100 times. We have the finest receiver of taxes in New York State. And I'll say that to Mount Blue in the face. So I don't want any doubt from anybody about what we're trying to do. We're trying to implement an institutional change with, and why were we able to reduce taxes 61%? We have a dedicated town employees who've worked with us through thick and thin, some uncertain environment for the last 7 years. With hugely dedicated staff. And we've worked with them to try and make our operations more efficient. Again, Town Clerk Veska has been receptive to all of our changes, as has Receiver of Taxes Mecca. So, in that vein of trying to improve the efficiency with which we operate the town and run the town, we're proposing that the Receiver of Taxes position no longer be elected by the public. It's an administrative position. It's not a policy position. We therefore think that, you know what, this is probably something that you should hold the town board to account for. Hold the town board to account rather than, try and, select as a voter the receiver of taxes. Again, this has absolutely nothing to do with Mr. Mecca. Similarly, I think Mr. DiCrescenzo, everybody watches these town meetings every month, has done an absolutely fantastic job. He's come here every month, update on the bridges. Now, somebody was telling me the other day, well, the bridges took too long to do. Well, we're not running the show. We're financing the show. The Village of Mamaroneck is running the show. And maybe you could talk that a little bit more, Mr. DiCrescenzo. Again, a terrific job, a committed public servant, nothing to do with Mr. DiCrescenzo. But ultimately, what we're trying to think about is how we can potentially engineer savings. And one of the things we've talked about here, when we move to and by the way, since this is the last meeting, when we move to our new offices, we're putting our town clerk staff alongside the receiver of taxes staff. And they've always worked together very, very well. And that will be our client-facing, constituent-facing services. And as we go down the road, if we can eventually begin to rationalize and share some of those responsibilities, and we can reduce costs with the cooperation of staff, we would like to consider that. So what we're looking for is greater flexibility to continue to reduce taxes. My goal, and we're going to go into executive session after this, would be to find a way to give Mr. Mecca a contract, if we could do that legally, beyond his term, for however long he wants. So that's my stated goal. I don't know if I'll be elected or even run for office again to be here in January.